nobody should really know how our effects are achieved. I think it puts a wrong slant on the movie. If you take a particular moment, action moment in the film, and everybody in the audience knows, oh, well, that wasn't Timothy Dalton doing that, that was his stunt man. I mean, it's not a good thing. It takes believability away from that moment. On the other hand, if someone says, oh, that was Timothy Dalton, he did his own stunt, well, that's bad for the movie, too. The audience should just quite simply believe that the man, the character that they're watching, does them.
Could not have put it any better myself, Tim. If you're familiar with my previous Mission Impossible reviews, then you'll know that despite being a massive fan of spy media in general, I've had a very mixed reaction to the Tom Cruise action series, and for those of you who aren't familiar, here's a quick summary.
It's alright, I guess.
Oh dear god.
Not too bad at all.
Oh, this is getting really good now. But Rogue Nation, despite being the 5th film in the series, feels like something of a start of a new era. Personally, I've only recently seen the film, I watched it for the first time for the purpose of this review, but at the time that it was coming out, I remember people were really raving about this one.
It received great critical reviews, did very well at the box office, and ultimately drew a lot of comparisons to the Bond series, particularly around how the film provided entertaining spy thrills with fun gadgets and action set pieces, all while telling a compelling story about heroes investigating a worldwide villainous organization and not feeling the need to take itself all that seriously. Did I mention this film was released a few months before Spectre? But first, pay attention to 007 fans, or Hunt fans in this instance, because this is a shout out to Ekster, the Amsterdam-based company who specialise in very high-tech, stylish, smart accessories, with wallets being their flagship products. They are currently having a Father's Day sale on their site with up to 25% off across the store, link in the video description box below. I've featured a couple of Ekster's products in previous videos, including the Vachetta wallet model with its lovely premium bronze leather and the space-grade aluminium card holder, both still working really nicely. The card release mechanism in particular still working like a dream, and I have precisely zero regrets in giving up my clunky old wallets in favour of these. They're all so compact and streamlined, it's lovely. One of the more Bondian elements, or in this case I suppose Huntian aspects of the Vachetta model is the smart tracker. This little thing is jam-packed full of features, including obviously a tracking feature, so if your wallet, much like Ethan Hunt in this film, is prone to going rogue every now and then, it makes it very easy to track it down. Maybe Alec Baldwin should have slipped one of these into Tom Cruise's pocket during this film. He'd have had an awful lot more luck finding him. So yes, Ekster have 25% off across their store for Father's Day. It's good for gifts or even just to treat yourself, so do check out the link below. In the very broadest of strokes, the plot follows Tom Cruise's Ethan Hunt in his battle against an evil organization known as the Syndicate. Hunt is disavowed by the CIA after it disbands the IMF, so our hero finds himself in a race against time along with a team of returning faces to expose and take down the Syndicate before it can do relatively nebulous evil things. We'll get into it because really the main focus of the story here is on Hunt and his growing relationship with Rebecca Ferguson's mysterious Ilsa Faust, a British MI6 agent undercover in the Syndicate whose loyalties remain unclear for a good chunk of the runtime. As with all of the Mission Impossible films so far, the exact intricacies of the plot are there if you're looking for them, but the real focus is on the human drama and the fantastic action set pieces that are the real highlights of this film. I found it really interesting listening to the audio commentary by Tom Cruise and director Christopher McQuarrie on the film's Blu-ray. The pair are very much open about the fact that the story was being developed as this thing was in principal photography, and sometimes actors would be delivering ill-defined dialogue in scenes without really knowing what it all meant, because even the filmmakers hadn't figured out what it all meant yet, and that's not to ding the film at all. I mean, this is a far more common practice for these kinds of big-budget films than I think a lot of people realise, and I think for a film like this to focus the creative energies in pre-production on the set pieces and then kind of figure out how to string them together in a convincing enough way along the way is the right way to go about it. Though ultimately, much like all of these Mission Impossible films so far, if you asked me to recite you the exact details of the villain's scheme, I'd be pretty hazy on it. The good guys need to get the thing! Okay, why? Because the bad guys are gonna kill world leaders! Or something. As I say, the far more compelling aspect of the story is Hunt and Faust, the frisson between them, Faust's loyalties, and whether or not Mrs. Hunt is going to pop up at any time to give us her feelings on this flirty back and forth. Spoiler alert, she doesn't. I love these two on screen together. Their dialogue and banter back and forth is spot on, and both are incredibly convincing and accomplished in their respective action sequences, largely because both did a heck of a lot of training for these parts, and it really shows on screen. Great work. And indeed, I'd say this greatness extends to the vast majority of the supporting cast. I love so many of them: Simon Pegg, Ving Rhames, Sean Harris. Alec Baldwin. Okay, I don't mean to be shady on Jeremy Renner. I think he's actually better here than he was in the previous film, where it felt like they were really plumping him up to take over the franchise from Cruise, but here he returns to be just very much a part of the team, and spoiler alert, I was quite surprised that at the end of the day, he is just another member of the team in this film. I mean, the whole team come together, and none of them die, none of them are revealed to be a mole, they just come together, work as a team, and get the job done.
And in a weird way, I found that to be oddly refreshing.
It's just such a trope that always that someone has to die or be revealed to be a bad guy or a traitor or whatever in order to raise the stakes, and here they don't do that, and that's cool and kind of unpredictable, but ultimately, I guess from a story perspective, it does give this one a feeling of, oh, well, I guess that's another one then. I mean, Hunt goes rogue in every single one of these films, so there's no sense of elevated stakes there, but previous films have dragged his own wife into situations, killed off his entire team, made things personal, and here it's very much just getting on with the mission. There are emotional stakes, don't get me wrong, but it's just not as heightened as it has been previously. Though, as I say, I find this more refreshing than anything else, but I think it goes to show how conditioned we are these days to expect that, you know, this time it's really personal and all those kinds of elements to these things, but really, I just liked that Hunt and his team have their mission and they go and do it. Now, there are twists and turns and ambiguity with Faust along the way, but overall, I was just very happy to go along with this ride. And of course, a huge part of that enjoyment comes from the multiple impressive action set pieces the filmmakers have constructed here, my favourite of which being a sequence set at the Vienna Opera where Hunt has to thwart the assassination of the Austrian Chancellor who is due to be killed at an exact point in the musical composition. This is clearly a direct lift from Alfred Hitchcock's The Man Who Knew Too Much, or Men Who Knew Too Much, I guess, given that he remade his own film back in the 50s, but the film really makes the most of this setup, provides a few unique twists, and I love the gadgets during this whole sequence too. I wish the Bond films were still doing these kinds of fun things. Christopher McQuarrie has seemingly become the de facto director of this series now, and I think he has a really good eye and taste for what to draw on for inspiration from this film. I mean, he even draws on inspiration from previous films in this series. Some plot elements feel very familiar at this point. I haven't seen Mission Impossible Fallout yet, but I know he comes back as director, and I'm really excited to see what comes next from the guy based on this. I've very much enjoyed the fact that each of these films has had a big name director at the helm, but if the series had to settle down with just one of these people, I'm happy for that person to be Christopher McQuarrie. Now, obviously, much is made of the fact that Tom Cruise does a bunch of his own stunts in this film.
No, really, he does. You think they'd talk about it more.
And yes, it's incredibly impressive that he clung onto the outside of a plane during takeoff, and that he trained to hold his breath for a super long time for filming a sequence underwater. It's just a shame that it all looks so fakey in the actual film. I mentioned those two stunts in particular because they're the ones that I saw being talked about the most during the promotional blitz for this film, and indeed, the purpose of Cruise doing all of these things is to sell the film more than anything else. It's done so that people can lean over to other people they're watching the movie with and say things like,
"That's really him on that plane, you know. You know he actually trained to hold his breath for 6 minutes for this? That's actually him, you know. Do you know he actually died for our sins in order to play this part? I don't care."
I guess I ultimately subscribe to Timothy Dalton's incredibly sagely words on the subject of stunts. As an audience member, I just want to believe in the character that I'm seeing on screen, and there does exist a middle ground between the abundance of Roger Moore doubles in A View to a Kill and Tom Cruise's face being all over Rogue Nation. I mean, obviously this film really wants you to know that it's the man himself doing this stuff, but my main bugbear is that the plane stunt looks like it could very well have just been achieved with a green screen and a powerful hairdryer, while the underwater sequence exists on a primarily computer-generated set that I feel like this could have just all been achieved without the actor going to such real-world lengths. Obviously, this tact works well for Cruise, though, and these movies are very much promoted on the back of wait to see what crazy stuff he's gonna do next, folks, and that's all well and good, but ultimately, I'm somewhat removed from the reality of the thing, because when I see him doing this stunt, I'm remembering a morning TV behind-the-scenes snippet about how the thing was achieved, rather than getting lost in the spectacle. You absolutely cannot fault Cruise for his dedication, though, and I love how much he seems to love making these films, and I appreciate how he plays the Hunt character in these more recent installments. I commented in the first 3 films in particular how I felt the character was more of a personified grinning ego trip, but in this one and in the previous one he feels so much more human. He makes mistakes, we're invited to laugh along as they make a little gag about his height, and I love the bit after he's been revived from initially drowning and he's just really off his game for a little bit, and there are some funny moments. I like it when Tom Cruise does more self-deprecating comedy bits, and overall I think he works incredibly well too with the cast that they've assembled around him. I've really come around to him and the character
Spectre, like so much by this point that I may have to retire my stock response from that Frasier episode whenever I talk about this guy.
I don't like him.
One recurring issue that I have with the series, though, is consistent with this entry too, and that's that I do tend to find that the film's final acts are something of a disappointment. I do wonder if this is largely down to them using their most impressive set pieces earlier on in proceedings, but by the time it comes down to take down the final villain, I always find myself slightly disinterested. And here, Sean Harris is the main baddie, and he's a really great actor. I love this guy in everything I've seen him in, but I think that Philip Seymour Hoffman probably stands as the best Mission Impossible villain this series has had to this point. Before I wrap up, it would be remiss of me to not talk about the similarities and comparisons to another 2015 spy movie release, Spectre. The films have an awful lot in common regards their stories. Obviously, the villainous group angle, both have the lead agent going rogue while their respective organizations are called into question and even shut down at some point in the story. Neither kill their main villains, instead capturing them alive. Both go to Morocco and Austria and have a climax set in London, and heck, both even filmed at the same Blenheim Palace location. It's impossible not to compare the two films, and I find it interesting that Rogue Nation was originally scheduled to come out just a few weeks after Spectre, but ended up having its release date brought forward, so it ultimately released in July 2015, while Spectre was released in October-November 2015. Now, I'm a pretty big Bond fan, though I don't know what gave that away. And Bond films exist in a separate space from me entirely. I find it very hard to rate Bond films out of 10, for instance, and compare with other non-Bond films. For some reason, just in my brain, they exist in this separate space of enjoyment, but despite all that, and me not really being a massive fan of Spectre, it still slightly pains me to say that of the 2015 spy movies, Hunt trumps Bond. Rogue Nation is a fun, exciting spy heist film with lots of invention, action, and good humor to provide an entertaining, fun time. It has a consistently excellent tone, and while the plot can be a little bit tenuous at times and the last act is a little iffy, another similarity with Spectre, I'd be surprised if any spy movie fan didn't find some joy in this. Ultimately, the Mission Impossible films just keep getting better and better as they go along, and now I am genuinely very excited to see Fallout. Well, that's it. It's obviously time to pack all this garbage away and follow my true calling and become a Mission Impossible dedicated channel. So, your mission, if you choose to accept it, Mr. Hunt fans, is to scroll below and subscribe to this channel if you would like to stay up to date on future video uploads, which may or may not be 100% Mission Impossible related from now on. Also below, you can let me know your thoughts on this film in the comments section. Please do let me know, but no spoilers for Mission Impossible Fallout. I haven't seen that one just yet, but I am curious to know whether people think, like, it still gets better from here. I'd be really curious to know, so please do let me know in the comments section below. Also below, you can find links to my social media pages, including my Facebook page, my Twitter page, and my Patreon page, for those of you who want to go one extra step in supporting this channel. With all that being said, I suppose I need some kind of Mission Impossible sign-off, like, oh yeah, how about in however many seconds this review may self-destruct, so I would highly recommend that you...